Here are 3 things that I would love for you to know that I had to learn through committing adultery against Jesus. I committed sexual sin knowing that it was bad, but not understanding the spiritual aspect of what my behavior was doing. In Matthew 5:27 and 28, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Now, I want you to consider this. If we're looking at someone lustfully and we're committing adultery with them, who are we then committing adultery against? Naturally, if we're committing adultery with someone, we're committing adultery against the one that we're in a covenant relationship with. And so Jesus in these verses was not at a marriage conference only speaking to couples. He was speaking to married people and single people. And so when I was watching porn, I was going to sexual sin, these verses condemned me because I'm thinking, man, my behavior is bad enough. And now I'm getting told that even a thought is adultery in my heart? Well, that's even worse because I didn't know how to read scripture. But what Jesus is doing here is actually so profound. He's not just bringing our mind and our heart into the equation when we're in the behavior of sexual sin. What he's doing is he's bringing himself into the equation as well. He's saying that when we lust after somebody, it's actually committing adultery against the covenant relationship that we have with God. Hearing this, you might think, man, this is just condemnation on top of condemnation, and it's just getting worse. But I want you to see the opportunity that Jesus is presenting to all of us. What he's doing is he's saying every time there's a moment of lust or sexual desire in your life, it's an opportunity to look up and remember the covenant relationship that you have with Christ. Every time we see beauty in something that we want to lust after, it can be a reminder of the greater beauty and the greater covenant that gives an even greater satisfaction to us in our lives when we really are intimate with Christ. So here are 3 things that I would love for you to know that I had to learn through committing adultery against Jesus. First, he is more committed to his word than he is to our comfort. See, I thought I could just keep going and keep going and keep going back to sexual sin because Jesus could understand the grief and the emotional pain that I was in. I figured once I was a more emotionally whole person, I'd get out of sin and God would understand it the whole time. But God said to me one time through reading scripture, "Crucify the desires of your flesh." I thought, wow, he is more committed to his word than he is to my comfort. I learned that my fear of living the exposed life and having people know what I was doing was greater than the fear of God that I was allowing into my life. The fear of God has to take precedence, and so God eventually led me to live the exposed life and expose what I was doing. And now I've learned that he is more committed to his word than he is to my comfort. And so when his word says to walk in the light and to expose darkness and that he who conceals sin will not prosper, he is committed to that more than he is to my comfort. I have the fear of God in a new way because God taught me something when I committed adultery against him. Secondly, I learned that scripture is not written through a works perspective, but through the perspective and the lens of a spiritual union that we have with Christ. When we read Matthew 5:27 and 28, it is so easy for us to look at the works and the behavior and the thoughts that we have. But what Jesus is doing is he's speaking through the lens of a spiritual covenant that we are in with him. He doesn't explain it outright like that because in his mind, it is an absolute given that of course he is speaking through this lens. And thirdly, I learned that God is so much more about my heart than he is about my sin. I always would say God had to deal with me. And one day I felt the Lord's whisper in love. He said, "I wasn't dealing with you, Matt. I was loving you." The amount of opportunities in my life that God has opened the doors to is so profound, and I don't deserve any of them. You know when he started opening more doors? When I confessed my sin. When I started telling people more about what I did than I ever had told before, all of a sudden, more doors opened for opportunities in my life in various ways. God wasn't dealing with me, he was loving me because he was caring about my heart more than he was about the behavior. He wanted me to quit the behavior, but he wasn't simply focused on that. He was going, I want you to receive love from me in a way that the adultery and the sexual sin is stopping you from receiving. So put in the comments which revelation is the most profound for you. Maybe it's that God is more committed to His word than He is to our comfort. Maybe it's that Scripture is written through the lens not of our works, but a lens of the covenant that we have with Christ. And that's how we can read those verses in Matthew 5:27 and 28. Or maybe it's that God is so much more concerned with pouring His love into our heart than we can even understand, because we're focused on the sin and think He's going to be mad at us. All the while He's just going, your sin is getting in the way of me pouring my love into your heart. Put in the comments which revelation speaks most to you, and make sure you share and subscribe to this video for more stories of me exposing myself, my stories of my sin and my shame for you.